One who I'm sure would have welcomed the Prime Minister's well-articulated new resolve is Senator Eric Abetz, who joins me from Hobart. Senator Abetz, welcome. And I hope I haven't verbaled you by saying that I suspect you are very much in sympathy with both the Prime Minister's comments at the Pentecostal conference and also last night in what I think is probably will be remembered as a headland speech during this Prime Ministership.
The Prime Minister's speech has been exceptionally welcomed by, I think, the vast majority of Australians who just don't like this idea that we divide ourselves into tribes of men, women, black, white, homosexual, heterosexual, name identity of choice, and somehow that then either gives you a victim status or some other status that is more worthy than anybody else. The simple fact is we are all humans. We are clothed with a dignity of humanity. And if you're a Christian like I am, you believe that all people were made in the image of God. But even if you don't agree with that, hopefully you can accept that the basis of our common humanity has to be that we respect each other for our character and our humanness, and not because we happen to have a particular skin colour or a particular sex, hair colour, or whatever identity you choose. So, look, a very good speech with a wonderful audience, and I think it would not have been lost on the audience where the Jewish people, of course, because of their particular identity, was so horribly and cruelly persecuted. And I think it gives us a window as to what happens when you go down this road of identity politics, either for good or for bad. It just does not work, never has, never will. And that is why, as Martin Luther King wisely put it, he wanted his children to be judged not on the colour of their skin, but the content of their character. And that's the fundamental.
Do you, I guess you'd regard George Christensen as something of a loss, Senator, wouldn't you? And George has been an outspoken defender of freedom of religion, for example, and despite an enormously targeted campaign, got an enormous swing to him in Dawson. I was deeply disappointed to learn that he'd walked away, especially with a youngish man. So do you think perhaps the PM's starting to read the room in the lexicon we're being told of in the current zeitgeist? He had a look and thought, maybe it's time I better herd the Conservative wing back in and show them I stand for something.
I'm not sure whether George Christensen's proposed departure had anything to do with it, but the point you make is very good. George Christensen was vilified, and what happened? His vote increased. You go to South Australia, Nicole Flint, a wonderful Conservative woman, great loss to the cause, was vilified and pursued by Get Up and the left. And what happened? Her vote actually increased. And so I think that those of us that hold to certain traditional values can be emboldened by the fact that our fellow Australians in fact support those of us that give expression, and they want to know what our leaders stand for. And look, the Prime Minister had to be very pragmatic in dealing with a national cabinet and Labor premiers and leaders during COVID. But now is the time, I believe, to once again set the scene for indicating to the Australian people where the Liberal Party stands. And I, for one, thought his speech was wonderful, and 100 out of 100 for that speech, because it really set the tone, and I think will be embraced by the vast majority of our fellow Australians.
Indeed, and there certainly has been some evidence to that effect already, hasn't there, in the sense that, we've discussed this, you and I, privately, that Twitter isn't the real world, and if you believed Twitter, this government wouldn't have been re-elected in May 2019. But I think people really were repulsed at the highly personalised attack about his faith, and that includes people of faith would have hardened their resolve and will change their vote on this issue. And I think a fair number of the quiet Australians get offended when people are seen to be piled on Twitter. So to see that happen to the PM, it seems to me, lifted him out of something of a trough that he'd got into. Would you agree with that assessment? It looks to me as though he's actually benefited from the fallout, from the abuse that he was subjected to.
First of all, Twitter is the sewer of social media, and if you follow Twitter and think that that is reflective of our society, you've got it badly wrong. In relation to the pile-on with the Prime Minister, I think that has helped him because there's this saying, which I think is true, you can assess the character of a person not only by the friends they make, but also by the enemies they make. And those that piled onto the Prime Minister have been particularly unattractive in their language and attitude to those of faith and those that might hold alternate points of view to them. But they then are the ones that say, we need tolerance, we need acceptance, we need diversity. But hang on, not if you're Christian, not if you're conservative, not if you hold to traditional values. And that is where these people alienate so many of our fellow Australians, because if you actually do believe in diversity, if you do believe in celebrating alternate opinions, why shouldn't the Prime Minister's faith be seen as an expression of the diversity of the Australian population? And the Prime Minister is just one expression of that.
Indeed. Now, I'd be remiss, given you've got the state going to the polls tomorrow, what's your sense of the electoral mood in Tasmania? Most of the state premiers have benefited from the pandemic and are at unbackable odds. Presumably, the government will be returned. Is that your sense? And is there any implication for the federal party in that?
I would like to think that the Premier Gutwin and his team will be returned. They clearly deserve to be returned. Elected 7 years ago when the state was in recession, we are now not only the turnaround state, but the standout state. Our economy is growing quicker than the Chinese economy. We have the best economic indicators out of all the states and territories, according to CommSec. But all that said, Will Hodgman got 51% of the primary vote at the last election and won by a one-seat majority. And so that tells you how very close things can get in the Hare-Clark system in Tasmania. But look, I would like to think that the Liberals have done an exceptionally good job in turning around the economy and in the handling of COVID. And on those two criteria, the Premier deserves a huge tick, as does his team, and hopefully that'll be reflected in the ballot tomorrow.
And on another, a smaller ballot, but what's your sense of the Queensland party's likelihood of putting Amanda Stoker number one vis-a-vis James McGrath? I guess you've got to be very careful there about your two colleagues in the Senate.
Look, love them both. They are both exceptionally capable and competent individuals. And I suppose I'm glad I'm not one of the selectors in that. There was two high-quality individuals, and I wish both of them very well, and may success be with the one who is favoured by the rank and file of the Liberal National Party up there in Queensland. But let's hope they all get elected, irrespective of what position they might have on the Senate ticket.
Indeed. Well, if last night's clarion call to arms impacts that very religious area through Queensland that I travelled through in 2019, Senator, I suspect you'll see an overweight return from Queensland again whenever the next election's called. Eric Abetz, thank you for your time. Thank you for making it into our Hobart studio on a Friday night, and look forward to seeing you in Canberra in due course.
Thanks a lot, Catherine.
All the best.